Thank you. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Adams, Councillor Mrs Bradwell, OBE, Councillor Nicola Clark, Councillor Mike Clark, Councillor Cook, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Griggs, Councillor Hall, Councillor Key, Councillor Mrs Julie Killy, Councillor Marfleet, Councillor Reid, Councillor Skinner and Councillor Ray Wotton. Thank you.
Thank you. Working. I think it is now. Sorry about that. The next item on the agenda is declarations of councillors' interests. Do members have any interests they would like to declare? No? So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting of the County Council held on the 21st of May 2021. I'm going to say that move that the minutes of the meeting of the County Council held on the 21st of May 2021 be approved as a correct record and signed by the Chairman. But I do understand Councillor Spratt has got a point of order to raise.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. May I just ask that the minutes be corrected in that it says who was present at that council meeting, that I was present, and I was unfortunately not present due to bereavement, and may I thank friends and colleagues for their kind words and such like, but just for the interests of clarity, otherwise I should have had to vote against the minutes and then everybody would have wondered why.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I mean, Mr Chairman, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. That will be put right. So would all in favour of the proposal I've just made, that with that amendment, that the minutes be... Is that agreed? All in favour? Yeah. Anybody against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next item, which is Chairman's announcements. I'm delighted to be chairing a full council meeting in the council chamber at last. The first time since the initial lockdown. It is good to see you all in these surroundings face to face again, and albeit still taking care to do all we can to prevent the further spread of COVID. As we fast approach autumn, we continue to adapt to new ways of working, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank officers for their efforts to ensure important council services continue to be delivered to the high standard Lincolnshire residents have come to expect. All restrictions are carefully being lifted, and I am looking forward to being able to continue my role as chairman and meet the people of Lincolnshire. I'm particularly looking forward to being part of Lincolnshire Day on the 1st of October, when for the first time we will join with our colleagues from North and North East Lincolnshire to celebrate our continued commitment to working together for the benefit of all our residents. On a sadder note, I have to report the death of two former county councillors. Red Shaw, who represented the former Skellingthorpe and Highcombe South electoral division from May 2009 until his retirement in May 2017. Between May 2013 and May 2017, he was Executive Councillor for Waste and leader of the Liberal Democrat group on the council. And also Mike Exton, who represented the former Deeping St James electoral division from June 2009 until his retirement in May 2013. There will be an opportunity for members to speak in a minute, but I now invite members to stand in silent tribute before that. If you would bear come. Thank you. Thank you. Right, do I have anybody who wishes to speak? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just firstly, I'd like to just a few words about Councillor Mike Exton, who was a Conservative councillor, and obviously he represented Deeping St James for 4 years. Although he represented Deeping St James, he actually lived in Stamford and was very well known in Stamford, highly respected, and it was his whole family is well known there, and his funeral was very well attended, and there was a lot of tributes. But he represented Deeping St James for 4 years. It helped that the sitting councillor didn't get his papers in time, so that helped him get elected. But I have to say he took it very seriously. He did have family collections in Deeping St James. He was a very effective local councillor, and I think due to his increasing health problems, he decided the journeys up to Lincoln was no longer viable for him or for his constituents. So yes, I mean he did, and he took his role very seriously. Reg Shaw was, of course, a Liberal Democrat, but also was in my executive for 4 years, a portfolio holder for waste. And he was, again, a very well-respected individual locally. I did manage to get to his funeral. He was a school teacher who was highly regarded. And I think all of us who knew Reg, although his politics was very much Lib Dem, he was a quiet and very polite individual, but he was very, very straightforward. And I think in his time on the executive, he performed that role very well. And he was a very loyal member of the executive, bearing in mind it was a coalition. So again, very well respected, and he made a very good contribution to this council. And it's a shame that he didn't have longer to enjoy his retirement. So two well-served councillors who will be sadly missed.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Right, I have Councillor Bowles now who'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to say a few words about Reg Shaw. I first met Reg personally 26, 27 years ago when I walked into Castle Hill School as a Year 7 student. I think it's fair to say as Reg was a drama teacher and I was a sports mad 11, 12-year-old. We didn't always see eye to eye, and we weren't singing off the same hymn sheet a lot. But after leaving school and college, I went back to Castle Hills to work as an IT technician, and then I spent the next 15 years working alongside Reg. And I think, as Councillor Hills alluded to, there was a lot said at Reg's funeral. I think anybody who worked with Reg and saw him in action with children really knew that's what Reg was about. Councillor Brockway said it at West Lindsay. Reg was an enabler. He enabled children from all backgrounds, all abilities to really strive and do the best, whether it was in performing arts, whether it was in other school areas, whether it was just in life in general. And I think the outpouring we saw from hundreds of ex-pupils of Reg's over the last couple of months, you know, some who are now performing in the West End on stage, some who are in dance academies, others who are just living their lives, and have all said that, you know, they owe so much to Reg for having that belief in them, giving them that, you know, that arm around the shoulder when they needed it, just driving these kids on and helping them be the best they could. Personally, I wouldn't be stood here doing what I'm doing now without Reg's help and support. It was Reg, along with former councillor Leslie Rollins, who convinced me to first stand as a town councillor in Gainsborough. You know, gave me all the support, the encouragement to do that. You know, gave me the knowledge, experience to be able to campaign and all that kind of stuff. And even, you know, up until probably the last year or so, 4 years being here on my own as a Lib Dem, you know, it was always Reg that I'd ring, email, even when he was in France, and he was always there to help, you know, give you advice on a question you wanted to ask, you know, things you wanted to say, who you wanted to speak to. He was always at the end of the phone. He was always there to help you. And it was the same for children he taught. It doesn't matter if he taught you 10 years ago, he was always still there to go to for advice, support, guidance. So he was a wonderful bloke. There's so many people in Gainsborough who owe so much to Reg. So just on behalf of our group, everybody who knew Reg, all the kids' life is influenced, just thank you to him, and all our best wishes to Heather and the rest of his family. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do I have anyone else who wishes to speak? Well, thank you. Councillor Retroid.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to talk about Redshaw. Obviously, me and Reg competed and stood against each other quite a few times over the years. Reg was a very big part of Sturton by Stow, where he lived and where I live as well. And he always put the community first. He was always there for everyone. And I think he'll be certainly missed in Gainsborough, but in the villages which he represented as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bertroyd. I can't see anyone else indicating, so I would thank you, three of you, for those words, kind words about extremely dedicated past councillors. Thank you for that, and we'll move on to the next agenda. And that is statements and announcements by the leader and members of the executive. And those statements by the members of the executive are detailed as report reference 5 in the agenda previously circulated. So moving on to item 6, which is questions to the chairman, the leader, executive councillors and chairman of committees and subcommittees. I am anxious to allow a good spread of questions across the chamber within the time allocated. I intend to allow 45 minutes for questions. I'm expecting councillors to be disciplined because of the time available. Just think about the councillors who are waiting to ask questions following on from you, please. When invited to ask their questions, councillors should press the large button on their microphone to make it live and press it again once they have finished speaking. And the first question I've got is from Councillor Mrs Jackie Brockway to Councillor Lindsay Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand that this council has involved itself in trying to ensure that the annual Steampunk festival, known as the Asylum, returns to Lincolnshire. Given the social and economic importance of this festival to the county, please could you tell us how you intend to achieve this in the short and the long term? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your question, Councillor Mrs Brockway. As you know, we're a partner in enabling these events. We're not the event organisers. So in August this year, we understand that because of COVID and because of concerns by the Safety Advisory Group that the event couldn't take place this year. There was a lot of concern that the events would be lost to Lincoln. So in August this year, Lincolnshire County Council, Lincoln Business Improvement Group and the City of Lincoln Council signed a 5-year memorandum of understanding to secure the future of Steampunk Festival in Lincoln. And I want to say thank you to Sarah Loftus, who's announced a resignation from Lincoln Big. She'll be going to York. But what she did was integral in ensuring that all three organisations worked together to bring Steampunk back. So as part of that memorandum of understanding, the County Council agreed to provide the following spaces in Lincoln Castle, exclusively for a ticketed area for Steampunk. So we've got the exercise yard to the west of the male prison in the court car park, the Heritage Skills Centre, the ground floor of the male Victorian prison, and the enclosed exercise yard to the rear of the Victorian prison and the south lawn of the castle. Now, this was really important to get in the deal over the line because the organisers of Steampunk wanted an enclosed area where they weren't being encroached on by members of the public, particularly intrusive photographers who then went on to sell the imagery because it was a private ticketed event. But from our point of view for the castle, it takes place over the bank holiday weekend in August. It's our busiest weekend. We couldn't close the castle, so we came to that compromise agreement and everybody is really happy with that. And the Ministry of Steampunk were very happy that we'd come to that compromise. And through its economic recovery funding, Lincolnshire County Council will provide a one-off payment of £5,000 towards the creation of an installation to act as an additional draw for the 2022 festival, recognising that the Steampunk Festival is worth £2.5 million a year to the greater Lincoln economy. So over the lifetime of the memorandum of understanding, that's a lot of economic development money we're bringing in. So we're not the organisers, but we're proud to have been able to facilitate that. and I look forward to welcoming you in your fantastic costume. And anyone else who wants to dress up and look daft. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Right, the next question I've got is from Councillor Karen Lee to Councillor Richard Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Davis, a number of people have approached me and they've said how difficult it is for both pedestrians and cyclists to cross the bypass at the Rice Home roundabout, you know, the one that's big and improved now, and particularly for youngsters. And I wonder if there's anything that could be done to mitigate that, anything that could be put in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very good point, and actually for further along as well at the other roundabouts, we have similar queries. I think we looked at this before the works were done, and the real query with the Rice Home roundabout was land acquisition, because in order to put in because ideally you'd want an NMU bridge to go across the top, would have involved much more of a land take, and all the works we did to improve the roundabout were within the highway's boundary, which meant there was a lot less red tape and we could get going and spend that money quickly. We are looking at the access on that north side for both Rice Home and also the Necklam and the 158 roundabout as well. Ideally, we would want some kind of bridge structure. That's going to be more difficult to achieve. I think perhaps when COVID has settled out, we'll re-examine it and see if there is something we can do in terms of phasing. The introduction of lights, for example, might help. And of course, the bigger issue, I think, at times is the congestion that's forming along those roundabouts. It does make it more difficult. So that stretch is under review constantly, but we'll come back to you on that.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. The next question I have is from Councillor Richard Cleaver to Councillor Martin Hill. Councillor Cleaver.
Councillor Hill, your views on fair funding for Lincolnshire are well known. This year, the Borough of Westminster has sufficient funding to charge just £827 per household for Band D, whilst Lincolnshire authorities like SKDC need to charge £1,785, double, to keep services going. Can you report any progress in the campaign for fair government funding for Lincolnshire, please?
Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much for that very helpful question. Yes, obviously you're well aware there has been a long-standing campaign to actually get fairer funding. You're quite right. The current system, which we've debated many times in this chamber and I know elsewhere, it's very unfair at the moment. Effectively, Lincolnshire residents and rural residents are paying more council tax in effect to get fewer services because the funding is so unfair at the moment. I think we are now waiting upon the Chancellor's autumn statement. Rumours have it that that will be a 3-year settlement. I say there are only rumours at this stage, and I'm not sure at this stage whether as part of that 3-year settlement there will be time for the government to complete its review of fair funding. It has committed over some years now to review that, and certainly when Rishi Sunak was local government minister, I think that had a lot of impetus and a lot of thrust to actually sort out a very unfair situation. I think it's also fair to say, since he was no longer local government minister, that has become a lot less thrust, shall we say. And I think there is a concern that if we do get a 3-year settlement, that there will not be time for the continuing work on fair funding, which the government is doing, to actually implement it. That would be very bad news for Lincolnshire, especially when you also consider that looking at the potential Chancellor's statement that the local government department in Westminster is not a protected department, and we know that some departments are protected, will either be getting no requirements of savings or indeed get more money. The local government department, along with a few others, is not. So the inference might be that savings would be back on the agenda. So I think it's a very topical point, and I think we need to redouble our efforts to make sure that we don't forget about this and let the government forget about it. Frankly, it has taken too long. There's always been an excuse why it shouldn't happen, and I think it's high time they delivered on this. And you can take my assurance, if they don't deliver on it, we will be making the point very firmly to government and to our MPs to make sure that we shouldn't just lie down and accept an unacceptable situation much longer. Thank you.
Right, next question is from Councillor Stephen Bunny to Councillor Richard Davis.
Councillor Davis, as you probably know, the A631, which runs through Market Raisinwold's constituent ward, is a straight road with lots of right angle bends in it and an attraction for both cars and motorcycles. Recently, a lot of work has been done because it is recognised that it is a dangerous road, and we are very grateful for the work that has been done. The surfaces have been improved, which of course also means that it's easier for the vehicles to go faster. The stretch from Market Raisin out to Ludford and beyond, I do believe has got speed restriction motions which are about to come in, and we're waiting for those to happen, and I would hope that they will be in place pretty soon. But there are major issues also on the stretch of the road from Grantham down through West Raisin to Market Raisin. I think every year that I have been in this area, which is about 30 years now, there have been fatal accidents on that road. And I think there is time for the speed restrictions which have been agreed, but yet not imposed, for the eastern side to be on the western side as well. I know that there are 1 or 2 speed cameras there, but the locals would tell you that they could be repositioned and be more effective. What effectively is required is a average speed system, I think, from the Cambie corner end right through. Can you tell me, or can you confirm what sort of things could be done and how they could be progressed in the future?
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Yes, and with your predecessor, this is an area of the road network that's been looked at a lot. I think we need to be a little bit careful in setting a false expectation that speed management alone reduces accidents. I know, and I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but when we've done kind of Archer surveys along there in the past, there aren't always that many percentage of vehicles going beyond the speed limit. The problem is particularly bikers are a real issue along there, where when they do, they are so far above the speed limit that they are creating a menace for both themselves and others. I think there is an argument for making some average speed camera additional works along there. It does make a difference, and when we've done it, say for example, the A52 near Ropsley or the A16 near Spalding, on the Spalding to Iron Road, it's made a real difference. The Road Safety Partnership are particularly concerned about that stretch of road. I've spoken and we've met about it this week already, particularly around motorcyclists. So I think there's a combination there of potentially average speed cameras, but also looking at the design and layout of the road in terms of markings to encourage road users to slow down. And I think it's particularly dangerous because it's intermittent traffic, particularly on the other side across towards Hamswell Cliff. What I would say in terms of speed camera locations and the additions of new ones is the legislation is such that we don't, unfortunately, have the power to just say wherever we want to put it. There has to be a case made based on proven accident history. It has to go at a known black spot. And in terms of the imposition of speed limits alone, that's for the Planning and Regulation Committee. It's not something I have the power, unfortunately, to bring in. So it's not a quick process. But again, as I would reiterate, it's not all about speed limits. I think a large portion is speed enforcement. One thing that has changed in the last kind of 12 months is now we have a road policing unit based here in Lincolnshire again. I think we are all seeing more police cars on the network, and I think the chance of being seen speeding is a very effective way of reducing speeding. If you kind of come around a corner and you see a police car, you are less likely to speed, and the reality is I think for too long we just didn't see enough speed cars on our network.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Mrs Angela Newton, MBE, to Councillor Daniel McNally.
Sorry. Thank you. I know we spoke recently, and thank you for coming to look at the Spalding Waste Centre. I've had various comments from people, mixed of course, as I expected. But generally, I've used it and I've found it works pretty well. But there are comments that the staff have been ordered by LCC to run a single lane operation at the centre when the centre has a dual lane setup, and are LCC playing political games with the waste centre. to try and cause the queues. I personally don't think so, but have we instructed the staff not to let people form double queues? I did notice that when I went in. And what can we do to relieve some of the pressures that there are? And do you agree that if there was a double queuing, people could help themselves more to the skips, rather than have to wait for somebody to say, go to Unit 5? There's also comments that people who've got licences, who've got vans or bigger vehicles, have been, and somebody went on Monday, and the containers were full, so they were turned away. And then they were told, well, you've been 3 times out of your 12. If that happens, can that count as a void visit if it's not their fault that the container's full when they get there? Thank you. Oh, and when you're renewing the contracts next time, sorry. At the moment, we're only open 5 days a week, and normally through the summer, we're open all the time. And I was hoping that when we reopened, we would be open full time to deal with the backlog and help with some of the fly tipping. So when you're renegotiating, could we look at summertime opening being full time? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor McNally.
Thank you, Chairman. I should have started writing that down to start with. In terms of the renewal of the contracts, that's not until 2023 when that'd happen. And in terms of the opening hours, there's been issues with getting the staff for the sites and for the lorries to pick the skips up when they're full. So that there was an agreement to sort of go on the 5 day throughout the whole county. That is something I know there has been queuing. It's something we are looking at. If we have to change it, we will do. But it takes, I think, about 3 months for a contractual change. And I think at the minute in time, I think it's best just to keep everything steady rather than knee-jerk reaction. In terms of the vans turning up and not being able to unload, totally agree with you. I'll you know, if that's the case, just email me the details and I'll get it sorted. And the double queues, yeah, political, no, not at all. I think if it's anything, it will probably be a health and safety thing that they've probably implemented on the site, but that's for the contractors. I will find out and I will get back to you on that one.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. Right, the next question is from Councillor Adam Stokes to Councillor Richard Davies.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Now that the Grantham Transport Strategy Survey is live, will the portfolio holder join with me in again urging all Grantham residents and those in the surrounding villages to take part and give their opinions? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pleased to report, actually, Councillor Stokes, that we've had over 400 replies already to the strategy consultation. And I know we've got them starting in other areas, for example, Sleaford. And I know people sometimes get a bit kind of engagement fatigue, they start to call it now, where they get a bit tired of being asked questions. But now really is the time for residents and members to get your views into this process, so that in terms of where we go as an authority moving forward and the decisions we make around roads, about cycling, about footways, if you tell us what is important now, it makes the whole process and the outputs at the end far more efficient. So I'd absolutely agree with you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Thank you both for that. The next question is from Councillor Noisia to Councillor Martin Hill.
Got to bear with me, okay? First time. Other councillor, representation Mablethorpe and Sutherthorpe, and on behalf of my joint colleague, councillor colleague, county council colleague, I would like to ask a question to Martin, yeah? Many of my ward residents have been making contact with me and expressing, have to sorry, English not my good, okay? I cannot read very well, so be bear with me. And concerned about whole lane matter. What's that? association with potential radioactive storage fate. They are concerned the district county council have been ready make decision. Pete, can you explain legislation? What happened now? That easy word for me. And so I can explain this to my resident when they ask me. Believe me, I have to put this bit in, Martin. They are bullying me. Please explain to me so I can tell them. Okay, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sear. It's so good to see you contributing to the work of the council, and you certainly straight into the deep end as a councillor as probably the biggest event has landed in your division. So I know you are actually handling the inevitable concerns and queries and debate very well, and I'm sure that we will give you support as a council to make sure as a local member you're actually able to handle the inevitable increased traffic. So the situation is that obviously has been said a lot. It is not the county council who are promoters or the developers of this scheme. That is Radioactive Waste Management, a company called RWN, which is actually a arm's length company of the government. So RWM have identified Thedlethorpe, amongst other areas in the country, which could be suitable for the storage of radioactive waste. So, and this is the issue that they are looking for. That is, there is an international agreement where each country has committed to for the long-term storage of their nuclear waste, for example, France and places like that. So the government is committed to doing that. Currently, the radioactive waste is stored above ground, for example, at Sellafield and other nuclear power stations, which is relatively safe, but frankly is not safe for the long term. So the government is obviously committed and is determined to find a long-term solution. As I've said, Thedlethorpe is considered to be a potential site because of the geology and also because of the fact there's a redundant gas field out to sea. And I think the proposal, as I understand it, is to put this disposal 2 miles out to sea, perhaps, and several thousand metres below the sea. It's not a county council proposal, but we are being asked to engage with the process. So currently going through the governance of the county council is a proposal that the county council just join a community group, a residents, I forget what the word is. What's the word I'm looking for? Working group. I'm so sorry about it. A working group, a small working group, and that is not to promote the proposal. That is to make sure, first of all, that the local community are properly consulted, and secondly, to make sure all the information which so far has been fairly informally delivered is accurate, and actually make sure there is no further information going forward. So it has already gone to Economy and Environment Scrutiny Committee. It will also go to Overview and Scrutiny as well as for information, and then it will come to our executive on the 5th of October. So it is in process at the moment, but I stress it is not already decided, and obviously at the executive will take into account the views not only of the public and the people who are campaigning, but also, of course, of the scrutiny arrangements that have currently been undertaken so far. And when the working group is set up, that again will make sure the local residents are consulted, and it's clear from the legislation that for it to proceed further and actually get in, say, 20 years' time when nuclear waste could be coming to Lincolnshire or elsewhere, that the residents will have a say, and the legislation says that the local residents, which again needs to be defined by this working group, will actually have the final say. And if the local residents agree that they don't want it, that is the end of that process. But if they do agree, then obviously we'll proceed. So it is a long-running saga. When I say saga, it's a long-running process, and obviously the next phase, which will take some time, if this working group is set up, is for boring to take place. In other words, to bore down to actually know exactly what the geology is. Now that is quite a long process in terms of getting permission for that, that could be up to 2 years' time. So we are talking about a very long process, but certainly at the moment I know that Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee felt it was right that the County Council did participate in this working group to make sure the local residents are properly consulted and all the suitable arrangements are put in place. So you can reassure your residents it is not a done deal, and I think we will, the conversation and the debate will carry on for some time to come.
Thank you both. Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Kev Clark to Councillor Martin Hill. Councillor Clark.
Councillor, June of this year, the County Council received a letter from 14 Lincoln schools. The issue was the reduction on the special education needs. Over the summer, there's an exchange of emails, some of them rather long, and the conclusion, and I quote, it said the council have to stay within the government's allowance. It appears from the outside the county council can find extra funding for potholes but not for the welfare of children, which I'm sure you all agree isn't right. Therefore, will the leader of the council or the executive member hold a meeting with the 14 Lincoln schools to go through the reduction and, cancel the reduction before the effect kicks in on the children? Thank you.
Thank you. I obviously covering for Councillor Bradwell, who unfortunately can't be with us today. Obviously, the funding of special educational needs has been a long-running debate, and obviously there's been various changes to the procedures. But again, I mean, I'm sure Councillor Bradwell will give a more detailed answer. But my understanding is of this that in the system, we all individual school budgets do fluctuate depending on the number of pupils who are present, and changes to the system will mean that some schools will get more than others. I'm not sure that any school will actually lose out unless their pupil numbers do drop down. So I do think we'll look at it, and the Schools Forum, I believe, always, which as you're well aware, is where we liaise with schools. So I'm sure that we can make sure at the next meeting of the Schools Forum that is thoroughly discussed and debated, so there is a clear understanding of what is required and what is in terms of the funding and how that is managed. And there also, the Schools Forum does have some sort of influence on some funding which is currently held by the, not outside of the County Council, shall we say. So I think it is a live issue. I can't actually give you the full version of what goes on, but what I can commit to, it will go to the Schools Forum and there will be a discussion about that, because, with so many schools, all with their own budgets, there is always a healthy debate, shall we say, about who should get what, but there is an issue that we need to make sure also that children with special educational needs are the ones who really need it do get it, and sometimes the demand is what it's a question of what is required, or what bluntly is what some parents think is required. I think it's to be honest, that's the situation. It is a live issue, and we actually fund our schools very generously. And as you're well aware, in terms of children's services, we are considered one of the best in the country. So we will take those concerns on board, and certainly through the Schools Forum process, we'll address that debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Right, the next question is from Councillor Phil Dilks to Councillor Martin Hill.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all. Question to Councillor Hill. As you know, the Deepings Leisure Centre, which is owned by this council, has been closed on safety grounds due to a leaky roof following decades of lack of investment and poor maintenance. I understand that in 2014, this council withdrew a grant of £124,000 a year to support our leisure centre on the proviso that the county council would then transfer the lease to Deeping School. Could you say, please, why the lease has never, in fact, been transferred? And could you also say why, at the same time as our grant was stopped, I understand a similar grant to North Kesterburn Council in respect of the North Highcombe Leisure Centre continued to be paid by this county council for some years after ours was withdrawn? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks, for that. Obviously, in the Deepings, this is a very hot topic, as I'm well aware. Firstly, could I just clarify that, yes, I think there is an issue about repairs to that building. That is not an issue for the County Council. That was never our responsibility. So just to be clear about that, that although we own the building, we actually have, there was a repairing lease on it of no funding. So we didn't charge for the use of the building, but there was an expectation that repairs would carry on. So in terms of, and there is something called the Chance to Share scheme, which was something which was agreed many years ago, a long, long time ago, which was with some schools, there was sort of a joint arrangement between the leisure side, which of course is not a county council responsibility, the school and the county council. So the reason why the money stopped is that the Chance to Share agreement its time ran out. So it wasn't a question of us unilaterally withdrawing without notice. That was always the case and always understood to be the case. And that is different, of course, from the situation at the other school which you mentioned. The other thing I would also point out, although we own the building, one of the frustrations of the academy process, which I think none of us were very keen on, is that normally when a school becomes an academy, it takes all the buildings, even takes buildings which have just been built, paid for by the County Council. Indeed, County Council's borrowed money to repair the building. The school takes the building and the County Council keeps the cost of that repair. In this case, the school, because of the state of the leisure centre, chose not to accept the building, which in terms of the legislation was frustrating because they could see there was a problem there. So, you know, in terms of responsibility, well, the County Council's not responsible for leisure, the County Council's not responsible for what goes on in academies, and unfortunately there has been an unwillingness previously, although the County Council has tried many times over the years to get a resolution, both with the local district council and the school, and I'm afraid that there's been no resolution. There is no written agreement with this Chance to Share scheme, so that is why the funding stopped some years ago when, of course, that school did become an academy. Obviously, we are now in discussion with South Kesterton District Council as to the way forward, and as you are a district councillor, you will be well aware that that process is currently ongoing, but we will work with the district council to actually see for a resolution. We did come up with a proposal for a new leisure centre on a council-owned site, a county council-owned site, but that wasn't, although the executive of the district council agreed to that, a full council didn't, including yourself. So we are now in a situation where there's a bit of a resolution. All I can say is we'll do all we can in terms of regularising the ownership, and the leader of South Kesterton and myself have both agreed that we are willing to hand over the building so that then the district council can borrow money, which I think is their current proposal, to actually effect those repairs. So we'll work together, but we've done nothing which we said we wouldn't do, and I would hope that nobody would try and blame this on anything that's happened at the County Council.
Thank you both. Thank you for that. Right, the next question is from Councillor Sarah Parkin to Councillor Richard Davis. Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Richard, as you all know, the Active Travel Fund for Louth has met with large amounts of public support from businesses and residents alike. Can you do all you can do now to try and get some clarity about when the scheme will be implemented? Because that kind of information, that clarity is really important for us, and particularly for the business community in Louth at the moment, so they can plan for the next few months ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I mean, this is a real hot potato kind of nationally as well as locally. I think it's fair to say when I came to Louth, it's one of the few areas in the country where it seems to get on almost universal support. Everywhere else, it's really, there's a lot more controversy around it. I think there's some national guidance now about re-looking at some of the schemes, so there has been a delay, and I'm sorry about that, just to make sure there's lots of public buy-in, and we need to be careful that some communities kind of don't leapfrog over others. But as soon as we've got some clarity about timelines, I'll be back in touch.
Thank you both for that. The next question is from Councillor Ian Fleetwood to Councillor Richard Davis. Could I just, we've only got 12 minutes left, if you could bear in mind both questioning and answering, but there are other members behind you. Thanks.
Chairman. Fairly simple question, this one, Richard. I am not alone as a councillor in having many rural roads in my division. In fact, I represent 100 square miles-ish, and I've probably got 10 miles of A-class road. Extra money has been pledged this year to tackle some of the works these roads require. Could you please tell me how this money is going to be allocated across the county and the types of work it will cover?
Yeah, thank you. Colleagues will be aware that we're proposing to spend an additional £10 million on a predominantly our rural road network. So that's U's and C's and some B's. That's residential roads in kind of rural areas, and that could be resurfaced, redressing, fixing ironworks. The way the proposal is actually to spend it over 2 years, because really to get maximum benefit it makes sense not to rush to try and spend it all in one financial year. So broadly what we'll see is in year one, which we're currently embarking upon, is a process of patching, largely patching ahead of surface dressing next year, where you surface dress over the patches when they've bed in. That way we should be able to get a lot of mileage. What we're desperately trying to get away from is one-off pothole repairs, and we've, up in Bardney, for example, where we saw the stretches that have been done, they're great. We just need to see more of them.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Next question is from Councillor Rob Parker to Councillor Colin Davis.
Yeah. Morning, Colin. Your portfolio covers economic and environment. I've read your report, actually, and I didn't see any mention about Feddlethorpe. Feddlethorpe presents a challenge, doesn't it? Because on the one hand, it's partly about the economy, and on the other hand, it's partly about the environment. I'm just interested in your views on the way forward, particularly in relation to the current situation. We don't know what the future is going to be hold, but we do know that some areas quickly get a reputational issue around them simply because of the problem. It could be called blight, and I wonder about the question of whether or not land prices are going to go down, whether people, I know that people are concerned, have spoken outside the meeting that took place on earlier this week about what is going to happen in the short term. Given your responsibility for economic and environment, can you tell us how you propose to deal with the here and now of potential problems that people feel they're facing because of the unknown issue, which changes the whole nature of Lincolnshire from a rural county with tourism being seriously important into, in that part of the world, an area that is likely to become a nuclear waste dump?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Parker, and I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Hill said earlier in response to Councillor Noy-Sear in relation to the process around RWM's engagement with the local community. At the end of the day, the local community will decide whether this proposal gets to a point of ever being put in place. In terms of the coastline, I think we have missed the point that we live on and we are responsible for the most threatened piece of coastline in the entire country. Climate change will put that coastline at threat, and with that, the £700 million a year tourism industry that exists there. So the RWM proposal is a long-term proposal. It won't see the light of day for many years. It does have opportunities, of course, around protection for the coastline and opportunities around economy and jobs. But of course, the issues that you have raised in your question to me are the ones that the community must decide on. They're the ones that they will take a vote on at some point and decide whether this proposal goes forward or whether it's dead in the water. So my view is that the coast has got opportunities and it's got serious threats. These threats exist today, Councillor Parker. The challenge of how we defend our coastlines, how we protect our communities, how we protect our economy on the coast are questions that we're engaged with every day with the Environment Agency and every day with government. Because the challenge for us is to find the funding as a council and as a government and as a community to deliver a protected coastline. So if this proposal delivers part of an answer to that, then it's an answer that the community should have a say on, and that is the process. So I'm open to the discussion. I'm open to hearing what the opportunities are, but I'm also conscious that people are fearful and they have questions which they need answering. So let's just see what the process throws up, and then we'll take a view on it. And that's the way it should be.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Marion Overton, MBE, to Councillor Wendy Bowkett.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Lincolnshire has a growing number of older people needing care, and nobody wants to see a neighbour left without the essential care they need. Now the government has agreed to raise national insurance and therefore raise tax, but that appears to be swallowed up by providing subsidy for more wealthier people, adding to our costs. Can you assure us that you will be working with colleagues and indeed the local government association to help secure the long-term funding we need for our residents? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Overton, for that question. I can assure you that we are looking into the PM's announcement to help us with more funding. But obviously this also needs to be informed by the Chancellor's speech on the 27th of October. We should have more information by early November, and we're hoping to come back to all members just to show and how this will help us in Lincolnshire to look after our most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Tom Dyer to Councillor Martin Hill, OBE. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It's sort of following on from Councillor Overton's point. Can the leader please provide an update to members following the government's announcement on adult social care? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, as Councillor Bowkett has quite rightly said, obviously as more details emerge, that the Council and we will have to see how we respond, and indeed with County Council Network and the Local Government Association we'll be inputting. But there are some clear issues which I think Councillor Overton has highlighted. I was at the meeting of the County Council Network yesterday along with Councillor Parker, and it is clear there are issues which will need addressing, quite some serious issues actually, because obviously the government has committed to funding the council's share of the uplift in national insurance contributions, so hopefully that will come. But there are issues in terms of it hasn't really resolved the long-term issue of the adult care problem, if I can put it like that, because they're going to work through the issue in terms of resolving getting the new system into place when it finally kicks in. But there is the issue of the stability of the home care market, because of the commitment to give a cap for care, not for residential costs. That will mean a big shift in how the market works. And also there is the other issue of short-term funding for adult care. And again, I think we'll have to wait for the Chancellor's statement in next month. But I'm hopeful that we're hopeful that some money will continue to come from via the NHS, Better Care Fund and things like that. But of course, in terms, if there is a 3-year settlement, one would hope that those sort of arrangements would be embedded, because as we continually know, trying to manage our budgets on a 1-year basis is difficult. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hill. Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Ashley Baxter to Councillor Richard Bertroyd.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask about the Deepings Leisure Centre. You'll remember I asked last time about the Deepings Leisure Centre and a lot of water under the bridge since then. Can you tell me why there is no lease in place between the county, the district and the school at that site even now? And can you also tell me why the County Council and the school intend to spend £300,000 on a temporary sports hall stroke exam hall when the same amount of money would be sufficient to repair the roof of the existing sports hall? Not the pool, I hasten to add, but to make the current sports hall serviceable would cost the same amount or less than a temporary sports hall which is currently being planned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buttroyd.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Simple point, as a county council, we don't actually intend to spend the 300,000. The school itself, the academy, is down to look at, my figures were, that was told to me, 100,000 to put a temporary sports facility building on the campus. So at this point in time, we have not agreed to put any money into that deal. With regards to the lease, I think it was, from my point of view, it was down to the academy not wanting to take on the liability of the leisure centre. So that's why the lease remains unsigned. Obviously, going forward and working with SKDC, we would obviously like to resolve that. We'd obviously like to put things in place so a lease could be signed or transferred over from the leisure centre point of view. So we're certainly here to work with our colleagues, and we look forward to hopefully having this resolved quite shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buttroyd. Right, I've got the final question now from Councillor Colin Matthews to Councillor Mrs Sue Woolley. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Woolley, following the Prime Minister's recent announcements about adult social care and health reforms, please can you advise us where Lincolnshire is relative to the recent government proposals on integrated care systems, ICS, and how this links with other council services within Lincolnshire? One of the changes mentioned concerns the realignment of the boundaries of primary care networks, the GP practices. Interestingly, there are changes in partnership in my area being developed. However, it seems that in some cases, this is in the wider Lincolnshire context, in some cases, the CCG are listening to the GP network partners and linking to form comfortable provider partnerships rather than listening to the concerns of residents and patients locally, and therefore providing a customer-focused provision. Might you be kind enough to share your thoughts on that, Councillor Woolley? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for the question, Councillor Matthews. And Chairman, I'm conscious that we're now out of time, so I will speak very, very quickly. It's a case of how long have you got, because this is quite a meaty piece of work that's ongoing at the moment. As you know, we are in a phase where integrated care systems, and I have to say that I thought that local government did acronyms well. My goodness, we're completely out of the NHS league. They do them just as a matter of course. The integrated care systems completely support and agree with. In a nutshell, that's bringing health and social care further together and closer together for the benefit of residents on a smaller footprint. And as far as this council is concerned, I can assure you that we're working very closely with our NHS colleagues and indeed those wider partners who provide services to make sure that we've got something that is fit for Lincolnshire. And I have to tell you now, that's all I'm interested in. Does it work for Lincolnshire? Does it work for Lincolnshire residents? So consequently, a couple of examples. The Chief Executive and myself, we were part of a Q&A yesterday with non-executive directors of the health system, where we were explaining exactly what the council does as far as responsibility, where the crossover with health and care is. It was received very well, I think it's fair to say, Chief Executive, and we shall certainly be doing it again. And likewise, we've already formed an ICS, an Integrated Care System Development Board, which is a number of partners. Although this is an NHS piece of work, first and foremost, if it goes through government, goes through Parliament, as it is doing at the moment under the Health and Care White Paper, it becomes law in March, April 2022. And so we are working, as I hope I've just shown to you, we're well in advance, we're working up what we want to do.
You asked about the primary care networks, the PCNs, and again, don't wish to teach anyone to suck eggs, but for those that don't know, PCNs are groupings of GPs. We've got about 80 odd GP practices in the county, and at the moment they are buddying up, for want of a better expression, into, I think there's around about 13 PCNs. And when I say roundabout, it's because, and it alludes to the question that you asked, that there's a bit of flex at the moment. Groupings are not quite, they haven't been dictated by the CCG, so they are working out what suits them best from a working point of view, geographically, but roughly. I expect consolidation, I have to say to you. But having said that, I fully support the way that both they and indeed the CCG are monitoring the formation of those networks. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you both for that. Thank you. Right, we'll move on then to item 7 on the agenda, which is the review of financial performance 2020-21. It's a report by the Executive Director, Resources, which has been circulated. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Hill,
thank you very much, Chairman. I would very happy to move this annual decision for the Council to deal with the under or overspendings from the previous financial year. And again, this year we are considering an underspend, which is a good situation compared to many other councils in the country where we are still living within our means, but also providing the services which our residents require. Could I just, on a point of process, Chairman, this debate, because there is an amendment, so with a normal situation where the amendment will be debated and then we'll come back to the main substantive item, just so we know where we are. Is that
That's correct, isn't it? Yeah.
So when the amendment is moved, we'll debate that, vote on it, and then come back to this. Okay,
precisely.
Just so we're all clear there. That's great. Okay, so obviously you'll see in the papers circulated that there are various proposals how to deal with this underspend. The 1% carry forward, of course, which we usually do, and that will continue. There are some various items in there in terms of where the various parts of money are going. Some of them are housekeeping in terms of flood defences and other things, and to deal with an annual allocation for the cost of elections. As Councillor Richard Davis has previously mentioned, within there is the 10 million allocated for roads, rural roads, and obviously he's already explained how that will do. Obviously the Council needs to agree that today, so that money will be made available to highways effectively to move forward. There's also a mention, of course, of the Financial Volatility Reserve, which actually we took out £12 million, £12.5 million in the spring to deal with those businesses in Lincolnshire which were struggling because they couldn't access the support which was available by the government to deal with coronavirus. That scheme has been incredibly successful, and there are many businesses who are surviving and thriving today, frankly, because we were able to give them that support. And I think it was a massive bonus for the County Council that we were able to make that money available. We didn't spend all of the £12.5 million, and the scheme has drawn to a natural conclusion, as indeed many other sort of short-term solutions for coronavirus will come to an end. So there is some underspend from that, so just over £12 million will then go back into the Financial Volatility Reserve, and also there is a sum of money also just over £2 million, I believe, which will also go into reserve to deal with specific overhang of the coronavirus issue, because we all hope by now that we were all sorted with and it was all a thing of the past. We now know that it's still there, and we don't know what will happen over the winter period, whether there'll be more disruptions to the economy and to businesses. So we think it's prudent at this stage just to have a reserve there so we can draw down on any new issues, but also any overhangs in terms of stuff which is currently carrying on. So I think it's a good news story for the County Council. We could be very pleased and thank officers and portfolio holders for actually making sure that we remain within budget. As I said, the services we provide remain very well regarded and in the main good. There's always choices to be made, and that will come over in a minute. But I do recommend these proposals to the council, and hopefully they will be agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Have I a seconder? Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to second these proposals, and I want to reserve my right to speak later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Would you like to move your amendment, Councillor Parker? Councillor Parker.
Thank you. The amendment set out on page 4 of our green paper, and I want to move the amendment as stated. I think I'd want to begin by saying that already, as Councillor Hill has said, in this particular calendar year, money is being found, and rightly so, for support for business, rural roads, and flood and water management. We're saying that more money should be found this time for children's services, because just as much as roads matter, and just as much as flooding matters, and just as much as business matters, we say that children matter. In fact, I go back to the previous Labour government, every child matters. I think I would want to begin by saying that there's no doubt that the mental health, particularly mental health of children and young people, has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Evidence continues to emerge nationally, excuse me, and it's become clear that more and more children need new or additional mental health support. What we're saying is that this 2.2 million could be used effectively during the rest of this financial year in Lincolnshire. Nobody's doubting for a moment that we don't have a strong offer compared to other local authorities when it comes to children's services, recognised nationally. But that said, that there is still a possibility of us improving on the particular issues facing us about the way that pandemic has affected children and families in our schools. The pressure on early intervention is already being recognised within the department, and such services such as Healthy Minds, the demand on those services has been increasing. We recognise also that it's hard to quickly increase services, the capacity through the recruitment of skilled staff. It's challenging, but what we are arguing is that an investment of £1.4 million could hugely improve the emotional well-being of many of our children. And we recognise that we all have schools in our own county council divisions, so we all know, I guess, from contact with those schools about those pressures. Just want to make a number of positive things that could make a statement about a number of positive things that could benefit. Firstly, we could employ on fixed-term contracts more Healthy Mind workers. That would mean more children could be seen, waiting times could be reduced. For example, at a cost of £38,000 a year, a Band 5 worker could be working with a caseload of 70 children. Next, the fixed-term recruitment of more Here For You advice line staff would mean more children, parents and professionals could get faster early advice. As a council, we could provide time-limited grants to voluntary centre service organisations or children's counsellors to increase free-of-charge emotional wellbeing support for our children. There's a lot of things that we could do with this 2.2 million. All of this support could be targeted to parts of the county with the highest needs. This would help children aged from 0 through 5 to 19. The impact we have to recognise of not doing this, that is not increasing the amount of early support to children, which means that they will experience longer waiting times for help and sometimes not get help. It could also mean that the needs may escalate to the point where they may miss education, children miss education, and develop longer-term concerns that then require even more specialist services, such as CAMS. I also want to say that as well as that particular service, I want to mention children in care. We know that very many vulnerable children and young people have fallen behind their peers in both English and maths over the last 18 months. £800,000, the balance of that 2.2 million, would provide additional tuition of up to 2 hours a week in English and Maths for the next academic year for all those children in care aged 9 to 16 for whom we've got a corporate responsibility. We are, after all corporate parents as members of this council. It would allow those children the opportunity to catch up on the learning lost as a consequence of the pandemic. Okay. No one in the council chamber, I can't help but feel, would deny that this modest investment of 2.2 million isn't worth it for our Lincolnshire children, just as much as some of the other funds that we put in to other worthwhile initiatives. I move this amendment on behalf of the Labour Group and ask for all council support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Parkin, sorry.
Sorry, Chairman, I did take advice on this from the monitoring officer this morning because the Labour amendment as it was set out in the papers wasn't specific. The monitoring officer's advice to me was that if tuition was mentioned, additional tuition for children was mentioned, that I should declare a DPI and leave the debate.
Thank you,
So,
Councillor
sorry about the
Parkin.
ambiguity there.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Clark, start again.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm delighted to second the amendment from the Labour Group. I do not intend to go over the contents of the amendment due to it being described excellently by Councillor Parker. The clear situation we find ourselves in is underspending of funds. What do we do with it? One option is to put it in reserve. The other option is to agree the amendment which will bring benefit to many young people who are in need of help for their emotional well-being and mental health issues. This, of course, will mean the impact will not only be felt on the children, but on their families, not only now, but in the future. During one of the previous full councils, a councillor remarked, the reserves are for a rainy day. Can assure you that day is here now for the children. I'm sure the amendment will be passed for the benefit of the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Have I any other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Overton.
Thank you, Chairman. It is hard to see exactly how much is currently being spent, and we've not had the figures for what the waiting times are at the moment. But I did attend a meeting recently where it was pointed out that we do have some difficulty getting psychologists and other staff, and that may be something we can resolve with a little extra money. But what I would like to say in support of the motion is that what we have found time and again with care and with providing support for health is that it is so essential to get it at the right time, and delays are always extremely costly in terms of the health of the child and also the family and the people around them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Overton. Councillor Karen Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief. I just want to speak in support of the motion. I'm sure all of us in here recognise what a good way that would be to spend that money. And I heard reference to a rainy day. Well, let me assure you, it's absolutely pouring now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can't but respect the motives of the Labour Group for putting this forward, and I am speaking to the amendment. But my recollection over the last 4 years, every time there's any money available, they've put forward proposals to spend it. And by my recollection, it's between 15 and 20 million extra pounds over that period that I've been on this council. And the idea that it is raining now, I really don't think it is. If we get a bad government settlement, and one hopes that the new Secretary of State working with the Chancellor won't give us a bad government settlement, but if we do get a bad government settlement in a couple of years, we will need those reserves to keep services going, essential services. And the Labour group will be the first group to turn round and say, where's the money for it? And I do remember, I wasn't on the council at the time, but I do remember the last time the Labour group controlled this council in coalition with the Liberals, and they were only in for 4 years, of course, and interestingly, I think they lost power when the Conservatives won at the general election, which was rather unusual. And they left the council in a financial parlous state. It was almost bankrupt, and it was left to the Conservatives to come in and put the matter right again. We must never allow that to happen again, Mr. Chairman. And I don't intend to say anything other than this while I have got a few seconds left, just to speak to the main motion, which I do of course support, to congratulate the council on putting the £12 million, I know it hasn't all been spent, but the £12 million into the local economy to stimulate the local economy at very, very difficult times, Mr. Chairman, with also the massive government intervention that has been put forward to stimulate the economy and keep jobs going. And of course the Labour group will say, and the Labour opposition in Parliament, spend more, spend more, spend more. But there has to be a payback sometime, and they don't seem to realise that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spratt. Are there any other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Ashley Baxter. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't planning to speak, but I'm astonished. I think I was astonished when I found out that the County Council has got so much money in reserves and is not spending its budget and is carrying information over. Sorry, is carrying finances over. But I'm more astonished by the comment from Councillor Spratt that he doesn't think it's raining. If you look at the state of the county's roads, if you look at the state of the county's public transport systems, if you look at the state of adult social care, if you look at the state of children's services, if you care to come to the Deepings Leisure Centre, which is owned by the County Council, and look at the roof, you will see that it's raining. It's coming in through the roof, through your school buildings. So I think that you should open your eyes, realise that we are in a mental health crisis in this country, and support the motion to put some money into that field. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Have anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Brockway.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Isn't it great to be back in the chamber? Some really lively debate going on. It's very important that we put our views forward here, the different sides, because then we get a rational and balanced opinion. It's great to hear Councillor Baxter speak. Well, when he talks about the state of children's services, are you aware it's one of the best in the country and recognised as such? Are you aware that a lot of the school buildings are academies and nothing to do with this council? So not attacking you at all. I understand the nature of what you're saying. But at the same time, what we've got here is an excellent children's service run by a highly competent set of staff and a highly competent executive member who is not here today to answer this. And when we're talking about reserves, you're surprised at the size of the reserves. This is a very, very, very big council with a very massive responsibility in the county, and our reserves are not big for the size of this county and for the size of the council. The reserves are needed to go forward in the years coming. I'm going to vote against this amendment, not because I'm against the idea of making sure that the services are there as soon as possible, but because I want to make sure that the services are there tomorrow, and you can only spend the money once. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockway. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to speak, but Councillor Baxter's comment has just prompted a response from me. But first, I'd just like to compliment my colleagues that have just spoken to the opposition motion. You made comment, Councillor Baxter, about the state of the highway network in Lincolnshire and the lack of investment. I think actually the substantive motion clearly sets out what the council are doing in respect to that, and in particular rural roads. So you were wrong in that comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Councillor Bunny now indicated to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Like my predecessors, I wasn't necessarily going to speak, but I do feel here that we've got to be clear about spending and investment. I think when we talk about spending money on children's services, we could be in a situation of just carrying on with something which is already there. It is good, but we do need to invest in the young people of this county. I do think it is very important that we invest with young people now so that there in the future they can move forward. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bunny. Have we any other speakers? Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm very honourable to meet all of you today. That's the first thing. It's Councillor Parker. I think it's a very honourable subject to talk about kids, which is I totally agree with you. However, I have a few connections, and I talk to a lot of people in my community. At the moment, I think we're seeing less of problems with children, especially this is the beginning of the school terms. So I would rather advise, if we keep the money, we can keep it for a rainy day actually, and wait and see what's happening around, and then we can react. I think patience sometimes pays, and having good heads and spending the money wisely can help our county to deliver better services and deliver a better jobs for everyone who needs it in this county. Therefore, I'm not going to support the motion, and I will vote against it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Danny. We've got Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my short time as support officer for Council Bradwell, as yet I haven't got wet. We have a first-class children's services. If we want to protect that services, we have to have the reserves. We don't know what's coming. We need to be prepared for any changes. COVID could take over again. We just don't know. So I won't be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Strangle.
Thank you, Chairman. Point of clarification. I've heard Councillor Lee vote in favour of the motion. I've heard this councillor, Binny, vote in favour of the motion. We're talking about the amendment here, so I'm very pleased that they're going to vote for the motion, but really, we're talking about the amendment. So, nice to have you on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Strangle. Thank you. I'm sorry. You got a point of order? Yeah.
Point of order, I didn't say I was going to vote for the motion.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. I thought you was indicated to speak again when you'd already spoken. I do apologize.
Thank you very much. Yes, obviously speaking to the amendment, just to be clear, everybody here. Yes, I mean, basically this is a debate about, what we do with the good management of the council in terms of the underspend we've got, and whether some money goes into reserves or whether some money is spent on children's mental health in particular. And it is a choice again, and I think I would just I think nobody could claim that services are poor in the county council, so and I think credit to Councillor Parker, he's not claiming that, he's just saying more investment would be required, and I think we're in an ideal world, more investment would always be welcome in this place. And obviously there's been, somebody said, have you seen the state of the roads? Yeah, I have seen the state of the roads actually, and considering the problem we have with 5,500 miles of road, most of which is not properly built in the first place, I think the roads are in a pretty good state. They could be better. which is why we are proposing today that another 10 million goes into it. I note those complaining about the state of the roads aren't proposing to add any more into that 10 million, so I mean, presumably that's just rhetoric and nothing else. I would also just say that Councillor Bradwell does apologise for not being here today, so I've been deputised to some of the details, so I did make sure that she gave me a thorough briefing. So excuse me if I read some of this out, just to say that obviously the service is pretty good, as Councillor Parker generously acknowledged, and whether there's new investment needed. So just in general, we currently spend in partnership with the CCG, the NHS CCG, about £10.5 million on CAMS, which is Children's and Adolescent Mental Health Service. So that's a substantial investment across the county, which in that partnership has been a very successful partnership, actually. The government itself is actually expanding the mental health in schools teams, so 2 are already coming forward, and this is going to be funded by the NHS to the tune of £2.5 million a year by 2024, investment going in there. Education, wellbeing and mental health first aid training has been funded by the DFE and rolled out to over 95% of Lincolnshire schools. That is another £126,000 from government to support this. Education recovery strategy by the Department of DFE is also looking at that, and that will be a recovery grant of a further £107,000. And then there's the non-statutory early intervention, and the council investment in that is around £2.2 million a year. And then finally, we have also, in partnership with the Lincolnshire Partnership Trust, the Mental Health Trust, we have been put a bid in, and we have been allocated £2.5 million initially over the next 3 years. So there is substantial more investment going into this issue, and I come back to the point that yes, we'd all love to spend more money on this, but I would argue there is more investment, there is sufficient adequate funding going in as well. There was also a comment made about the rain. It's not rain. If I just finish, Chairman. If I just finish, there is the issue about it's the rainy days not here. There is a big worry now about the future of if we get a 3-year funding settlement and are anticipating if we do have to find savings, we need to just hang on a bit longer, because we may be needing those reserves to protect service in the future. And finally, it's all right talking about employing more people, but we won't be able to find them because there is a massive issue now across all sorts of services where we just can't find the people to do the current jobs or keep the current people doing the jobs. So the idea that we can find more people to do new jobs is probably too ambitious. So I will not be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Whitting, you seconded the main motion, didn't you? We're still on the amendment. Yeah, and so, the Councillor Hill was the last speaker as mover of the main motion on the amendment. So now we come to the vote on the amendment. That's right, isn't it? I've got that right. Thank you. Now we come to the vote on the amendment. And so would all those in favour of the amendment please indicate? Thank you. Would all those against the amendment please indicate? Yep, that's clearly carried against. Are there any abstentions? Would those against the amendment please indicate again, please? Thank you. That's 46 against the amendment. Again, were there any abstentions? no. But that amendment has failed. So we move on then to the main motion, the substantive motion. And does anybody wish to speak on the substantive motion? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wish to make a very brief point. As someone whose division is exceedingly rural, and as has already been mentioned, most are uncategorised roads, I certainly welcome, as do I'm sure my constituents, the extra money that's proposed into the rural highways, and it's very much needed. So thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Just a point of order, Chairman. The councillor that left the room can return now, can't she, I believe?
Yes, please. Thanks for pointing that out, Councillor Dyer. If we could get the councillor back. Thank you. Councillor Marianne Overton.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would like to support the extra 10 million going into highways. I think it's, in particular, for the rural roads. We have worked really hard on this county council to get our roads in a good state, and I would like to compliment the staff and the work that has gone into that to good effect. What we do have, however, in our rural roads is roads that have started to be undermined quite significantly, in that the water's gone down through the holes and run out underneath, and it does mean that they are seriously undermined. And that means that they do break up very easily when the weather is in that way inclined. So we have a huge problem in Lincolnshire. So many roads and such fundamental flaws. And that's why it's absolutely vital that we put the money in, because if it's not, it gets worse fast and makes a much bigger problem which we cannot possibly resolve. So urgent, early repairs, absolutely vital. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said, reserve my right to speak. I think some very excellent points were made by Councillor Hill regarding why we keep reserves. Part of the proposals today are to replenish the level of the financial volatility reserve. As Councillor Hill has already mentioned, whilst it is rumoured that we'll get a 3-year financial funding settlement in a few weeks' time, it's unlikely that that will probably include anything around future funding and redressing the imbalance that there is between urban and rural areas in this country, which is long overdue. We all know there's some quite large cost pressures that are already in the system coming through around adults, children's services and waste services. Potentially, we also now know that the changes to adult social care recently announced will probably start in 2023, whilst potentially the funding that has been promised for those probably won't come until 24-25. So potentially there's going to be a gap there of 12 months when potentially this council is going to be exposed. I think that once the Chancellor has announced his intentions, I know the adult social care finance team are going to work out the implication of potentially what that cost pressure could be to this council. So if you just look at 1.23 on page 87, why we have the financial volunteer to reserve. Created for underspends in previous years to cover budget deficits in the medium term. Well, Mr. Chairman, we potentially face quite a few budget deficits in the medium term until we get clarity around the financial funding statements and until we get clarity around future funding and the funding for adult social care. It's imperative that we replenish these reserves. And actually, if you look at the council underspend, it does look a lot, £29 million. But in the context of a budget of £450 odd million net, reality is that's a very, very small percentage. That's just a couple of weeks of keeping this council going, Mr. Chairman. So you have to look at the context always behind these numbers. So I'll be supporting the amendment. I'll be supporting the sound financial management that this Conservative administration and previous Conservative administrations have given Lincolnshire, and really pleased that we're not in the same financial position as a lot of other councils, increasing number of councils across this country, that are issuing Section 114 notices and capitalisation directives, who haven't managed their budgets properly, and as a result are facing bankruptcy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Councillor Hill, did you want to... Oh, it's Councillor Parker, sorry, before. Councillor Parker,
just commenting, excuse me, on Councillor Whittington. It almost makes you want to cry, doesn't it, in the sense of how badly the government are saying, on the one hand, woe, woe and thrice woe, about the financial state of the economy. And the first port of call is local government. What we're saying is that this is a Conservative government that is not recognising the importance of local services. That's the first point. The second point is that when it comes to £2.2 million that Labour wants to use for children's services, that's not acceptable. Yes, only a short while ago that, yes, justifiably by the Conservatives, money could be found from the Financial Volatility Reserve to support businesses, flooding as well. So it's a question of one position that is taken by the Conservatives when it's a Conservative spend, and another position that's taken when it's a Labour spend. The same amount of money is available at the same time, but it's just suddenly not acceptable, and we have to be careful and cautious when it comes to Labour spending, but not careful and cautious when it comes to Conservative spending. I think a lot of people have noted that across Lincolnshire.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Karen Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that I actually welcome investment in roads, but I welcome investment in our children as well. And I think the thing that shocks me most about this chamber today is I would like to have seen a better balance between the two. I don't doubt for a minute. I've managed a budget for many years. I'm not young. I know you have to have money put by, but it's the question of balance, isn't it, really? The balance between spending on roads and investing in our children. As I say, I never fail to be shocked at some of what I hear in political chambers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Hill, to sum up.
Well, I'm totally confused now because people are saying, well, I'm totally shocked, but oh, by the way, I do support spending on roads, and by the way, I do support this, that, and the other. These are choices, and I think we've made a very strong case where, you know, the children, the money, the area where money was requested to be diverted to, shall we say, is actually a strong area, and more money is being invested. So I don't really understand what's being said, and it's nothing about whether it's a Conservative or a Labour motion or idea. It's about the choices we've got to make. We've just had a general election, and I think everybody in this chamber who went out for election, the number one issue that the public raised with us was highways. That's not a party political point. That's everybody got that. So obviously it is right to prioritise highways. That's the message the public has gave us at the last county council election. So I think these are the right choices. Yes, we'd always like to spend more money, but I won't apologise for having a prudent budget which has underspent, and secondly, making sure that services are as well as they can be. But also, I make no apology, because in 12 months' time, we might be saying, well, and I think as somebody previously eloquently said, that, you know, and I think it was Councillor Spratt, we might be saying, oh dear, we've got to reduce this, that and the other budget because we've got no money. At least we'll have some money in the short term to deal with, and that was the whole point of the financial volatile reserve, and I make absolutely no apology for actually topping that up. We have rated it for business, and again, people are saying, well, it's a priority. Well, they've supported it, and when it suits, they say, yes, we agree with it. Then they sort of imply, we don't agree with it. Whether you point of votes like this, you make a choice, don't you? And it's your choice, and we've chosen to go this way, and I recommend this proposal to the County Council.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Right, we'll move on to the vote on the substantive motion now. Would all those in favour of the substantive motion please indicate? Thank you. Would all those against the substantive motion please indicate? Right, thank you, that was 4. And are there any abstentions? No abstentions. So that substantive motion is clearly carried. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda then, which is agenda item number 8, and that's amendments to the Council's constitution. A report by the Monitor Officer has been circulated. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Parker.
Yeah. Okay. So item 8, as a result of the outcome of the last election, the County Council election, the previous constitution indicated that there would be obviously a largest number of seats won by the largest party, and when it came to the second largest party, it didn't deal with the situation that we've now got, which is where the second largest party are two parties, each having the same number of councillors elected. That led to an issue around which party should be the official opposition and which group leader should be the leader of the opposition. This, I think, has got all party support in the sense that the resolution says that if the leaders of the groups coming together to form the opposition do not nominate a leader of the opposition, full council should determine which of the said group leaders will be the leader of the opposition, and recognises the Labour group and the independent group as the opposition in accordance with Article 305, and notes the nomination of Councillor Robert Parker, myself, as leader of the opposition for the period between now and the annual meeting of the council in 2022. What essentially that means is that there's at the moment a current arrangement whereby Labour and the independents will come together in a loose alliance, and the leader of the council, leader of the opposition will be myself until May next year, when it will change to the independents, and then the following year it will come back to Labour, and after the year after that it will be the independents. How long that situation remains depends on, for example, defections from political parties or by-elections, but we are where we are at the moment. There's been discussions between group leaders about this, and I don't think there should be any argument, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. I've got Councillor Dilks, I believe you're seconding.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I hope there's agreement across the chamber that democracy works best when there's an effective opposition. I'm pleased we've finally arrived at an arrangement we can hopefully all agree with, and allows the independent group and the Labour group to work together to provide that effective opposition whilst maintaining the identity of both our separate groups. This, however, is not just about who the leader of the opposition is. On that point, as Councillor Parker said, we've agreed to rotate the appointment on an annual basis between the leader of our two respective groups. More importantly, though, what this change allows is for a shadow cabinet to be formed from members of both the independent group and the Labour group, and I look forward to being part of that, and I hope everyone will support this. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Right, Councillor Spratt indicated to speak. Councillor Spratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sort of are half tongue-in-cheek, really. I'm going to ask. I don't know why the hell I'm going to ask, but I'd be interested to know who the deputy is going to be. Is the deputy going to be independent, or is the deputy going to be a member of the Labour group? And what I'd like to know is, if Councillor Parker's unavailable for any reason, who speaks for the opposition? And I think everybody who lives in the areas where independent councillors sit, they ought to be aware that the independent councillors have done a deal with the Labour Party, thereby ceasing to be independent. What an absolute sham. Although, of course, in the interest of convenience, I will, of course, vote for the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spratt. Have anybody, Councillor Mrs. Marianne Overton, MBE.
Thank you very much, and I am glad you're going to support the motion. That's brilliant. We are in the situation where we have two groups the same size, and we're going to retain two groups. So we shall have an independent group and a Labour group in this council, as we did this morning. So fear not, we independents shall remain independent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Overton. Have we any other speakers? No. Do you want to sum up, Councillor Parker, at all? No. No. We'll move straight to the vote then. Could all those in favour of the resolution please indicate? All those in favour? Thank you. I think that's clearly carried. I don't think there's any need to count on that one. Are there any against? Just for the record, or abstentions? No. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda then, which is the membership of the Lincolnshire Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education, SACRA. A report by the Executive Director responsible for democratic services has been circulated. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Dilks, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, sorry. Happy to propose this proposition, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Baxter is a leading member of the Open Door Church in Deepings, in my community. His wife's a teacher and they have 3 young daughters. So I know how passionate he is about both education and his faith. I'm confident he's the right person to contribute to the work of SACRA and have no hesitation in proposing him to fill this vacancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleaver. If not, I'll move straight to the vote then. Would all those in favour please indicate? It's clearly carried, just in case. Anybody against, just for the record? Or any abstentions? No, thank you. We'll move on then to item 10 on the agenda. Appointments to the Lincolnshire County Council Independent Remuneration Panel. A report by the Executive Director responsible for democratic services has been circulated. Is there a mover and a seconder?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to move this. So this is every 4 years the remuneration panel meets to independently recommend the allowances which councillors will receive. So that normally happens at this part of the election cycle. So what we're talking about today is appointing members to that remuneration panel. The panel will then meet between now and December and will come up with a recommendation for the December council. So it is moved that that Heather Lee and Eileen Lucas be appointed to the panel.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mrs Newton,
Thank you,
MBE.
Chairman. I'm happy to second this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Do we have any speakers on this? No, nobody indicating, so we'll move straight to the vote then. Would all those in favour please indicate? It's clearly carried, isn't it? Just for the record, anyone against? Any members abstaining? No, thank you. We now then move on to the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report, which is agenda item 11. Report's been circulated. Have I a mover and a seconder? Councillor Parker, I believe.
Thank you. Yep. This falls to me as chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, but really it's on behalf of the vast majority of councillors who work on scrutiny. There's a select group, yes, of people who make up the executive, but the rest of us, foot soldiers as it were, actually are there to hold the executive to account and to work effectively on examining policies and making recommendations to the executive. The report suggests, as you can see, just over three quarters of our councillors, those of us here today, are on scrutiny committees. We had 67 meetings in the last year. This is an annual report, of course. And essentially, we cover the whole range of council activities, with the exception of audit, which is separate. I think the couple of points that I want to bring out is that without effective scrutiny, then the work of the executive is not watched over, as it were, by other councillors. Now that's not meant to be a statement about trusting the executive, but what it is about is holding out to public scrutiny, although we don't get very much reporting of scrutiny meetings unless something unusual happens or controversial. But the work goes on holding officers particularly and executive members to account. How effective we are remains to be seen in one sense, but what it does mean is that people who put forward recommendations know that in the vast majority of cases those recommendations will go before a panel of their peers. And it does bring home through the public publication of scrutiny papers our openness to challenge. I want to thank Councillor Ray Wotton, who's not here today, who was going to second it because for the last 4 years he's been Vice Chair, and welcome Councillor Tom Smith, who is the new Vice Chair of the Scrutiny Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. I commend the paper to you. I'm sure that some of you, maybe all of you, have read, but not necessarily in detail, some of the work that we've done. So at that point, the chairs of scrutiny committees have made an important contribution to the putting together this paper, and I thank them for that. So I put this to the council and ask for endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Have we a seconder? Councillor Kendrick, I believe? No, Councillor Smith. Sorry, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to repeat what my Chairman of OSB, Councillor Parker, has said, just that I'm more than happy to second the motion, and it's a privilege to take over from Councillor Wotton and a privilege to work alongside Councillor Parker as his Vice Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you for that. I believe Councillor Brockway would like to speak. Councillor Jackie Brockway.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That's very kind of you. Yeah, Councillor Parker is thanking other people, and certainly I'm sure the rest of the committee would agree with me. I'd very much like to thank Councillor Parker for the very strong, robust and in-depth opportunity he gives us to scrutinise what's going on in this council. It's not party-based, it's proper, genuine, honest scrutiny. And that's a very nice thing to be part of, and it's very definitely stemming from his lead. So thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Brockway. Councillor Mrs Marion Overton.
Thank
MB.
you. I couldn't resist the opportunity of supporting scrutiny and thanking all those that have been involved. I would like to echo Councillor Brockway's remarks. The work of scrutiny is really important because it puts a lot of expertise, skill, thought. It reflects so many different parts of our county. And all of that goes into looking at what the council is doing or what the council might do in future. So a really vital part of our democracy, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Overton. Councillor Alison Austin would like to speak, please. Councillor Austin.
Is that right? Is that on?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just taking this one opportunity to speak today. For those who are new to the council, you perhaps don't realise, I'm not actually part of the ruling group. I'm independent. But in this council, scrutiny is something which is valued, and it is valued. That's the important thing. I know that throughout my 8 years that I've been on this council, the points that I make in scrutiny are listened to, and when appropriate, they are actually taken forward. And I feel that that is a privilege that this council allows every member, and not all councils do. So I'm very, very supportive of scrutiny in this council, and of course the lead that Councillor Parker gives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add to those comments. As Councillor Hill alluded to earlier, I'm a returner to this council. Say again? A yo-yo councillor. I thought you were going to call me a retread, but whichever. But as colleagues have said, let me say, you know, I think as a returner, I see scrutiny done much better than I believe it used to be done when I was previously on this council. So I do support all the comments that have been said. And I've been spouting for a long time. Good scrutiny, I have no doubt, leads to better decision-making and more robust decision-making if you've got those questions that are being asked at the right time through, hopefully, pre-scrutiny of decision-making. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Do we have any other Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As chairman of one of the scrutiny committees and part of Councillor Parker's team, as it were, I'd like to say that I find it a very rewarding committee to sit on, and it is very good in terms of the in-depth study that is made of various issues. And under Councillor Parker's leadership, we certainly get down to the nitty-gritty of many of the issues that are important to the council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to talk about my experience as a member of scrutiny committee in Boston. When I am on the scrutiny panel, I take my political jacket and leave it somewhere else, because there I'm debating for the people of my town and my borough. That's what I do. And I think scrutiny is a great tool to use to balance between the decision making and ourselves. And we have to look forward, and we have to create a debate where the debate is healthy and creating more opportunities and give a feedback to the decision makers in our borough to consider our ideas and to consider our information and our debates. Therefore, I think scrutiny is very vital for every democratic borough, town, county, wherever it is. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danny. Councillor Karen Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say briefly, I speak as somebody who was a scrutiny chair on the City Council for a great many years, and some of the scrutiny I did around the impact of poverty on Lincoln won a national prize. So I really do value scrutiny, and I have to say my experience as a newbie in this chamber, I've really enjoyed it, particularly the adult scrutiny committee that I'm on. There's some really good in-depth stuff, and I would agree that people do put their political jackets to one side, and it does actually work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Spratt.
Thank you. Just to follow on from Councillor Lear, though she's no longer across the road because she's been elevated and de-elevated since then, of course, but a definite retread. But what I was going to say, it's interesting what she says, and I agree with what she said about scrutiny and how valuable it is. And I attended a scrutiny committee which Councillor Parker chaired. I went in my sort of new role as bag carrier for Councillor Bootroyd. And there was a discussion that took place in relation to various elements of scrutiny, and I'm particularly impressed with something that's in the report particularly, although I want to emphasise, of course, Mr Chairman, I'm not a rural member, but on page 132, support to farmers. And I know Councillor Mrs Bokitt, in her previous role, we had a very persuasive morning, didn't we, on the Economic and the Environment Committee, talking about help and support to farmers, which will be carried on by Councillor Wotton now. And I'm really pleased, Councillor Parker, that that has stayed in here, despite the fact that some people didn't actually agree with it being in on that committee. But the point I want to make about what Councillor Lee said, because you did allow her, Mr Chairman, to talk about scrutiny across the road. And I want to say, I think it's very generous of Councillor Hill and this Conservative group to allow my good friend, Councillor Parker, to be the chairman of a scrutiny committee over here. Because, of course, if you go across the road, that Stalinist institution called the City Council, you are not allowed a single Conservative councillor as a chair of a scrutiny committee. You are not allowed a single Conservative councillor as a vice chair of a scrutiny committee. You are not allowed even a Conservative councillor as a member of an outside body. What a shame. And Councillor Lee and Councillor Parker and my other good friend, Councillor Clark, you should go back to the Labour group and tell them across the road and tell them how it's properly done and say how generous Councillor Hill is, giving the Labour group an opportunity that the Conservatives on the city, despite the fact that there are 10 of us, almost a third of the council. For now, you just wait till next year.
Thank you, Councillor Spratt. Thank you. Councillor Ashley Baxter. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I'd just like to draw, Councillor, through you, Chair, draw Councillor Spratt's attention to the situation in South Kesteven, which you might not call it Stalinist, but a very similar situation is there, where no members of the opposition groups are allowed to chair scrutiny committees, and that's a poor situation.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Thank you. Have we any other people wishing to speak about Lincolnshire County Council scrutiny report? Councillor Mark Whittington, thank you.
Yes, just a point of clarification on Councillor Baxter's last comment. It's actually incorrect. There is one member of the independent group who's vice chairman of a committee. It's Councillor Paul Wood. Councillor Baxter, he's your leader at SK. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's just pointing out.
My comment was that there are no chairs. I didn't mention vice chairs. And you're correct, there are 2.
That's a point of correction or information. Thank you. Right. I've got no one else indicating. I'm going to the vote now. Can all those in favour of the report please indicate? Anyone against? Clearly carried. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No. It's clearly carried, and we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is motions on notice submitted in accordance with the Council's constitution. And the first motion on notice that we have is a motion from the Labour group, and I believe Councillor Parker is going to move that motion. Thank you.
Okay. I think we all know about universal credit. Certainly it was debated in the House of Commons this week on a Labour motion, which was passed by 200 odd votes to 0. It was, in a sense, a motion that was going before Parliament just for discussion with no authority behind it if it had been passed. But here in Lincolnshire, you know, we have a situation where we know that there's going to be a number of people affected by the drop in universal credit, the temporary increase, the £20 a week, as from the beginning of October. We know, for example, as a result of the motion, that before the pandemic started, there were about 33,000 people on benefit, universal credit, that's increased to 67,000 people, doubling 95% increase. And we know that those people will lose money as from the beginning of October. In a full year, if all of them lost the full £20 a week, then that would amount to £67 million being lost out of the Lincolnshire economy. But at the same time, we recognise that each of those 66,000 people currently getting universal credit and the uplift of £20 a week, that means the difference in many cases to being able to survive or not to survive. We're saying very simply in our motion that we ought to be writing to the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to say that until we get a situation where the numbers of people on universal credit drops as a result of them coming back to work and out of furlough, that £20 uplift should continue. The reason is quite simple, that the people on benefit wouldn't be on benefit if they had what has been recognised as a decent living income, and it's only that's the basis for getting universal credit in the first place, which is entitlement as a result of relatively low wages or income. And it was recognised, secondly, that there was extra need as a result of COVID. I think it's fair to say that COVID has not gone away. It may seem to have gone away, but people are still eligible for this benefit and will continue to be eligible for it because of their personal circumstances. The argument that's been put forward is that it was only meant to be a temporary uplift until circumstances changed. Well, a lot of people would argue, I for one, that those circumstances haven't changed for those people that are currently entitled. The extra 33,000 that were the increase between what was in place before COVID, when there were 33,000 people in Lincolnshire, and 66,000. Now, I think that we've got a responsibility to be leaders and standing up for the people of Lincolnshire, that 66,000 people are going to lose this £20 a week. It's a question of where we stand. Do we stand on the side of those people who are eligible for it as a result of COVID and their previous financial circumstances, or do we say, yes again, to government, fine, okay, the situation is back to normal. Do we think it's back to normal? I argue that it's not. That's why Labour's putting forward this motion and asking for support.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Have a seconder? I believe Councillor Karen Lee is seconding. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking to second the motion by Councillor Parker, who told us that 40% of those claiming universal credit are in work. And these are people who are doing their absolute best to support themselves and their families. They're the shop workers, the taxi and bus drivers, postal workers, NHS and care sector workers. And these are the same people who kept the economy of this country going during the worst times of the COVID pandemic of the last 18 months. And they are many, many of those who I represent as Councillor for Ermine and Cathedral Division. Let us consider the Prime Minister's vision, which he claims is to stimulate jobs which pay people enough to stop claiming top-up benefits. Perhaps they'll all become lorry drivers overnight. And the PM's vision won't magically happen on the 6th of October if the government pulls the rug from underneath low-paid workers. £86.67 a month is a lot of money when you've got very little. And the harsh reality is that we live in a country where families are existing on low incomes and not having enough food to feed their families, having to rely on food banks like the one I help out at every Wednesday morning on the Ermine estate to top up their food cupboards and ensure the children have got enough to eat. And you might be forgiven for thinking that it might only be those on the opposition side of politics in this country who are opposed to the removal of the universal credit uplift, but that's actually not the case. And indeed, Stephen Crabb, Conservative former Work and Pensions Secretary, has warned that this risks putting people into poverty, as have a growing number of Tory MPs, including 5 other former Work and Pensions Secretaries, West Midlands Metro Andy Street, and Amber Valley MP Nigel Mills. And if Conservative members in this chamber don't want to listen to me, perhaps they might think about why senior Conservatives are making loud and worried noises about this. The let them eat cake attitude of Therese Coffey is utterly heartless, and it's actually been disputed by the Resolution Foundation too. Ensuring that hard-working people earn enough to pay their bills and are able to put food in their families' stomachs shouldn't be a party political divide. And obviously for some people, it isn't. I'm going to finish my speech with this, though. Removing this top-up overnight would be the single biggest cut in the history of the welfare state, a cut which would affect 1 in 14 people. And these are people who go out to work. And Mr Johnson often talks about levelling up. This cut is very much about levelling down. And I urge everyone in this chamber to be honest about this, to search their conscience and imagine how people who are impacted by this cut overnight will manage. And then do what is right in joining us in asking the Prime Minister to think again. Please don't just vote on party political lines. Think about this honestly and search your consciences, like some of your colleagues have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Have I any Councillor Martin Hill? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, just like this council, the government has difficult choices to make, and I do say a cut has been mentioned. I think just like the temporary support that we gave to businesses over the pandemic, and it was the pandemic which triggered that, exactly the same, there was additional money given to people to support people during the pandemic. The government has currently decided that should end as planned because the Chancellor of the Exchequer does have to somehow balance the books. And previously we've also talked about our concerns in terms of council services. So again, the Chancellor of the Exchequer will have difficult choices to make. And I don't think it's appropriate that we start trying to do his job for him. I'm sure the government are listening to these concerns. We are waiting for what the government announces next month in terms of the whole package of support. There has been a tremendous amount of support by the government to, in all sorts of ways, including universal credit, a massive, unprecedented amount of support. And I think hopefully that's acknowledged, but the problem is if then people say, oh, well, you know, you're cutting, that rather you get to the stage where people might say, well, we better not give this any additional further temporary support because we'll just accused of being cutting. I fully understand, I think we all fully understand the issues which I'm talking about, and we fully understand about the pressures which budgets are on. But as was also said in the House of Commons, I think in terms of the labour market, that is the employment market, there is going to be a lot of increases in salaries across the piece. It's not just drivers for Waitrose or whatever. Across the board, including for our employees, there will be increases in their income because businesses and organisations are going to have to pay more because they will need the people to do the jobs. And I think there, in terms of the balance between the employer and the employee, I think the employee will have, and certainly in the foreseeable future, a much stronger hand in terms of the money which they can generate. And of course, the issue, some people have complained who didn't like Brexit. Well, one of the consequences of Brexit is, of course, that those people who are still in this country will actually see their wages enhanced because they won't be competed for jobs by cheaper labour coming from elsewhere in the world. So I do think, unfortunately, I understand where the sentiment behind the motion, but I certainly won't be supporting it, and I think we just need the Chancellor of the Exchequer to look at all these things in the round, and I'm confident they will come up with a solution which will deliver that. But I don't think we should start telling the government how to run their budget, or indeed we should start telling anybody else, and we just focus on what we have to do and the services we have to provide. And frankly, if money goes on universal credit, that will mean there'll be less money for our services. So I think, in balance, it's best not to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I take a bit of exception to what Councillor Lee said, that if you don't vote this, you're taking a gap away from your conscience. I work and help people on universal credit maximise their income either through work or through benefits, so I know how they struggle. But something she hasn't mentioned is those who are on minimum wage who, for one reason or another, can't claim universal credit, who then, because they've had a national insurance increase, are actually, in some cases, worse off. And as Councillor Hill has said, it isn't, however much we would like more money to be available, the simple fact is there isn't. And actually, it's not our job as councillors to dictate to the Chancellor how to run their budget. We take a bit of exception here when we're told by government how to run ours. So I think we need to have a relationship built on mutual respect of our levels of government and actually work together rather than trying to bat each other over the head. And that this is a very difficult issue. No one thinks that people shouldn't have extra money in their pockets to feed their families, far from it. But actually, this issue goes back to, is it the responsibility of the state to top up an employer's income because an employer is not paying somebody a fair wage, or is it actually time for employers, especially at low wage levels, and I declare an interest because my mother works in a supermarket, so it's low wage, for them to pay a fair wage so that actually they don't need the top up? Because personally, I think it's the duty of an employer to pay a fair wage, and that we should be doing things as representatives at all levels to ensure that takes place, rather than saying actually the state should have to pay this, because there's not an endless pot of money, and eventually you're going to run out. So the choice is we either have the increase, or we either have money for services and other things that the country needs to function. So personally, I won't be supporting the motion. It's not because I'm heartless. It's not because I don't understand, because actually I see it every day where I help people who are on universal credit, and I know how much they struggle. It's a fact of life that there's not the money to go round, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I clearly can't support this motion. The fact that it's even on the table today suggests that the Labour Party still hasn't understood the basic principles of universal credit. And they are fine conservative principles that we should be encouraging employment, that we should always ensure that work pays. The Labour Party still wants to pay people to remain poor. It's why the Labour Party lost the last election. It's why they lost seats that they had held for an incredibly long time. People want opportunity. They don't want dependency. The government's levelling up agenda is not about support, but creating opportunities to help people to progress. To really support people in the long term, the focus must be on getting those who can work back into long-term jobs. And I'm pleased to see that in April of this year, the government increased the living wage to improve earnings by about £350 a year. This is real help. This is genuine help. That is long-term. The United Kingdom has had a year of unprecedented additional borrowing, accumulating to around £300 billion between April 2020 and April 2021. The cost of universal credit, this short-term measure that was rightly introduced to see people through the toughest times of COVID, this increase is costing around £6 billion a year. It's worth bearing in mind that the national insurance increases that have been the subject of so much debate bring in £12 billion a year in additional revenue. Are we seriously saying, in the context of social care and NHS struggles, that we should take half of the additional money that is being put into that and spend it on what is essentially a return to an old and discredited system of simply paying people to be poor? If we are to get back to having a healthy economy and high employment, then that's actually the only way that we can get the tax revenues in the long term to provide support to those in real need who cannot support themselves. It certainly isn't the measure that the Labour Party is proposing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. And now go to Councillor Kev Clark, who has indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Lincolnshire has one of the lowest set of paid employees in the country. £20 makes a difference if you're working full time and on university credit. And of course, I can know what the reply is going to be. There's more people in employment now, and we're getting more people back. But if that's true, why is the people claiming university credit doubled? we're asking you to show support for the residents of Lincolnshire, write the letter, and who knows, we might even get something positive out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Dilks is now indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard the comments from across the other side of the chamber. I'm sorry to hear them, I've got to say. You know, criticising the motion, saying that Labour doesn't understand university credit. Would you say the same thing to the former Conservative ministers who have been speaking out this week and would vote for actually something much stronger than is in this motion? I'll just remind you, if you have actually to read it, it's not saying this £20 has to stay forever. It is recognising that it should be maintained in the short term and until such time as the number of people eligible is substantially reduced. That seems to me to be along what many Conservative voices I've been hearing on the media this week have been saying. I do think, I disagree with Councillor Hill, I do think we do have a role in lobbying government from Lincolnshire. And just to say, we are talking about our own constituents here. This isn't some remote government decision that isn't going to affect the people of Lincolnshire. This is going to affect, how many is it? 65,081 claimants in Lincolnshire. I would suggest that many of them live down your street and down my street. These are local people who are struggling, and most of them struggling to do the right thing. And you talked about work and getting people into... Many of them, as Councillor Lee has said, some 40% are in work. They are trying to do the right thing by their families and put food on the table. And as countless debt charities have said this week in support of keeping the £20 and not losing it in one fell swoop, it's going to go. It's going to be, the debt charities are unanimous. People like Save the Children are saying this is going to plunge thousands of people below the poverty line. This is not, this is not what we should be supporting. And as I say, many MPs of the governing party don't support it either. And I think just a little, this motion would just help, nudge Boris Johnson to say, you know what, there's people out there who don't support it either. So I would ask people to think again and really support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Councillor Ms. Marianne Overton.
Thank you. Just something, if the letter were to be written, that one might add is the impact on our council resources of this reduction. What are these people not going to pay for? Are they not going to pay their council tax? Are they not going to pay their council rents? Are they going to go without, and the children then need extra support and extra support for mental health and all of the other things they need because of their situation? So actually, I mean, we could actually do some sums and do a knock-on, have a look at the knock-on effect. One of the points, of course, that we've discussed before here is that these monies come into Lincolnshire from central government. And because of the situation these people are in, they do spend it because they need to spend it. So this money comes straight out of the economy of Lincolnshire. If it's not coming in, it's therefore a reduction on the amount that's circulating in Lincolnshire. That has a knock-on impact for us supporting businesses and our local economy, which is also our job. So actually, although it looks like money that we're asking for more money, we're not. We're actually asking to save ourselves some extra bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Before we move to the vote, could I just make one statement?
Of course, Councillor.
Very simply, that 66,000 people on universal credit means that in every one of our constituencies, as wards or divisions, there's 900 people on family credit in each of our divisions.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Right, I was going to, actually was coming to you to sum up, so yeah, thanks. Right, we'll move to the vote now. Would all those in favour of the motion please indicate? Thank you. Would all those against the motion please indicate?
Chair.
39 in favour. How many, sorry, against? How many in favour? Was it? 9, right. And are there any abstentions? Councillor Austin is then. No. Okay.
Sorry,
I've got one.
I called it out, but I...
No. We'll do. Yes, please. Would all those in favour of the motion please indicate, and we'll call the number out this time. 12 in favour. Would all those...
Sorry, did Councillor Austin... Councillor Austin, do you have your vote? Did your hand up for that?
I did this time, yes.
You did this time, it's 13.
Right. Yeah. Would all those against please indicate? So that's 40 against, 13 in favour. Any abstentions now? 1 abstention. Thank you. So that is clearly defeated, that motion. It's lost. So we'll move on to the next motion on notice, which I'm, in view of the fact that there is no food available today, it's coming up to 1 o'clock when we would normally break for lunch. I'm going to take this final motion on notice. I hope members support me on that, please. I'm sure you would rather get done and get on. So taking the final motion on notice, which is to be moved by... find the right one. Yeah, Councillor Cleaver is the motion on notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand there is an amendment being put to this motion.
No, you do yours first.
Right, okay, thank you. So, since before the May elections, I have been receiving emails and messages from local residents asking for 20-mile-an-hour zones in the built-up area in Stamford. Since being elected, I was quite surprised to discover that LCC has no plans to develop a policy on 20-mile-an-hour zones, and I think it's time we did develop such a policy. Research commissioned by the Department for Transport and published in late 2018 shows that 70% of residents in 20-mile-an-hour zones believe that they are beneficial for residents. Department for Transport statistics show that in 2019 there were 1,025 casualties in 30-mile-an-hour zones on Lincolnshire's roads. 20-mile-an-hour zones are very effective in reducing collisions and injuries. Research in 1996 showed that overall, average collision frequency could fall by about 60%, and the number of collisions involving injury to children could be reduced by up to 2/3. Zones may also bring further benefits, such as a modal shift towards more walking and cycling, and overall reductions in traffic flow, where research has seen a reduction by over a quarter. There is no evidence of migration of collisions and casualties to streets outside the zone. It should also be noted that traffic noise decreases as speeds drop. The difference between 30 miles an hour and 20 miles an hour is 3 decibels. I should also point out that as part of Lincolnshire's green agenda, we are encouraging parents not to drive children to school, but for them to walk or cycle. This is important, and it's a good thing. The school run in cars causes a lot of pollution and congestions at peak time, and 20-mile-an-hour limits will help encourage parents that it is safe for their children to walk or cycle to school. I can see no reason why Lincolnshire should not heed both the evidence of the value of 20-mile-per-hour zones and the wishes of its own residents, and now create a 20-mile-per-hour policy and implement it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleaver. Do I have a seconder? I believe, Councillor.
Thank you,
Mrs.
Chairman. I
Overton.
would like to second the proposal, and I reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Overton. Right, have we got any? Councillor Davies.
Thank you, and I welcome this discussion, and it's nice to have a motion that actually bears even passing resemblance to what we do in this chamber, so thank you. It is incumbent upon me, Councillor Cleaver, though, to correct a couple of small things, if I may. Firstly, in your initial motion, it suggests that we don't have 20-mile-an-hour zones in Lincolnshire. I can tell you we do, and it will come as a surprise to some of my residents who live in them that we don't have them. And not far from here as well, we have quite a successful zone, I think Councillor Parker's West End area, where we've introduced it and done exactly this kind of thing. And I believe it's actually, well, it's in our speed limit policy that we do, where applicable, apply 20-mile-an-hour zones. And also the Lincolnshire Police, and I've checked this because after reading your motion I was a bit concerned, and Lincolnshire Police have enforced them and do continue to do so. I think one of the things, that the feedback from the roads policing team and from the Road Safety Partnership is there is concern nationally that they really should only be enforced where there are physical measures in place that back them up, simply to avoid a situation where you may, for example, have a 60-mile-an-hour area, then all of a sudden go to a 20-mile-an-hour zone, and the police themselves, and I think it's perfectly rational, would say that would seem unfair and unenforceable. So they're not interested in enforcing that kind of limit. But where it comes as part of a package, for example, in the marketplace in Grantham or at West End here in Lincoln, they're very happy to do so and continue to do so. So I think we can take some small comfort from that they do exist in Lincolnshire, and I wouldn't want any councillors in the chamber or the wider public to think that we don't do them. That said, I think as part of the work that the Highway Scrutiny are looking to do later on this year, I think it's important that we should examine this issue in more detail. You're right, lots of people talk about them. I think there is a conflict, and I think to myself about my journey, and I suspect your journey from down in Stamford's not dissimilar, that if every community on every road that you drove through was able to reduce the speed of the road to 20 miles an hour, for example, me coming up the 607 from Grantham, it would slow the journey down. So there is a balance to be struck, and that's why I do have some small amendments to make to your proposal, and with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll detail them if that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
Firstly, sounds brutal, delete the first paragraph, and then we would alter the remaining amendment as thus. This council agrees to refer the Council's Highways Transport and Scrutiny Committee consideration of the Council speed limit policies in relation to the use of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and how the Council can assess and appropriately support communities who want to design and put in place a 20's Plenty campaign and propose any changes to the Council's speed limit policy accordingly. I think feedback we've already had this morning on that is that we'd like to see a time constraint in that, and my proposal would be that work should start within 6 months if that was appropriate. But that's my amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Colin Davey has seconded that amendment.
Happy to second.
Yeah,
I reserve my right to speak.
Reserve right to speak, thank you. Do we have any speakers, Councillor?
I'm happy to accept the amendment, Chairman.
You're happy to accept the amendment, so...
Likewise.
Okay, so Councillor Parker, and if you would like to speak on the amendment now, it's the amended substantive motion now.
A couple of things, yes. We've got a 2020 campaign within the area close to county offices in a highly urban area. The difficulties, two difficulties. The first one is, in a sense, the implementation of it, in the sense that we can have mobile cameras which have been bought by the local residents association, but it's the actual enforcement when it comes to the formal side of it through the police, because the police have got plenty of other things to do. One of the things that is possible is that if you get sufficient readings from cameras, then the police are more likely to come and formally intervene when they've got some understanding that there is regular abuse of the 30 mile an hour speed limit or the 20 mile an hour speed limit. So that's one good thing. I think the point, as much as anything, is the question of funding, because communities don't always have the finance to be able to buy sophisticated equipment. And the question then is support to communities. I asked the question whether that support is about providing some financial help. Now, I think there could be a link here between accidents and near misses, because I think that the local community, if it's organised, will be able to provide details of particular areas that are considered to be more frequently used and abused than other areas. So, I mean, it involves local contact between the county council and particular local communities to identify if there is equipment available, if there's funding available, and maybe some money could be potentially made available to those communities who want to design and put in place a Plenty's campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Parkin, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Really happy to support either the original motion or the amendment. I'm really interested in this. The Active Travel Fund for Louth is proposing a 20-mile limit through Louth. I think what really appeals to me on this is the opportunities that we have here to promote cycling, promote walking, and that double win that we have, not just in terms of environmental issues, but in terms of public health. And I recognise that the challenges that we have about enforcement, and I recognise that they're going to take scrutiny and they're going to take work, but we should never, ever, ever stop those kind of difficulties doing what is the right thing and sending a message to our residents and to the community of to our communities of Lincolnshire. I think there is resistance in some quarters. I think there are many people still think car is king, and I think we need to be really resolute in making the policy decisions and have that bravery to say there are other ways, there are other priorities, and that we will support our communities in finding them.
We now have Councillor Dyer, who was indicating to speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I'm just going to speak in support of Councillor Davies's amendment to the motion. And I'd just like to add really to the point that Councillor Parker made. Most of us here represent communities that have got parish or town councils. So one of my parish councils, Waddington, for instance, are in the process of purchasing some equipment for speed monitoring. But there is the issue really within the City of Lincoln where there isn't parish or town councils there to offer that sort of support to communities on a smaller level. So as a member of the Highways Scrutiny Committee myself, I'd be quite keen to look into how the County Council can support communities in Lincoln and other areas across the county that don't have town or parish councils, so they haven't got that local financial backing. So that would be something that I look forward to scrutinising further. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Now, Councillor Lee, who would like to speak.
Yeah, just very briefly, I wanted to speak in support of what Councillor Parker said. We had a problem on my patch during August. I contacted the police because people had contacted me because there was a lot of speeding going on around Ravendale Drive. And the police put out, I think it was about half a dozen different sort of people in different places, and they issued 25 plus tickets, they told me afterwards. But I just think the enforcement of this will be a real challenge. But I agree with Councillor Parkin, just because something's a challenge shouldn't mean that we don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Dilks.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I welcome the motion, I've got to say, which is provoking a debate, and I also welcome Councillor Davies's amendment to let Highways look at this and properly scrutinise what we're doing and can we do anything more. I'm sure it is a big issue in many of our communities. It is in mine. I remember some years ago going through Leicester, and I don't know if they still have them in Leicester, perhaps Richard could tell us, but they actually had mannequins, life-size mannequins of children outside, on the roads outside, that looked as if they were about to step into the road, and that really slows you down, I've got to say. So I think the whole thing is worth you know, having a scrutiny on, so I welcome that. And I was just looking up on the internet the statistics, and I'm sure Richard's aware of them, but if you're hit by a car, and if a child is hit by a car under 30 miles an hour, the chances are they will survive. They might be badly injured, but they will, or likely to survive. Over 30, they are much less likely to survive. So I just think that's worth thinking about when Highways scrutinises this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. I've got Councillor Strangle, Councillor Eddie Strangle.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to make a distinction. Councillor Parker said about cameras. What he's referring to are not cameras, they're speed indication devices that register a person going over a specific speed limit. It doesn't take a photograph, it doesn't record their registration. I know this because I chair a voluntary group in my patch, Birchwood, and we put 8 speed indication devices in Birchwood. They are expensive, £4,000 each, but we've done that. What I'm going to say is that you can identify groups that will give grants within what you're trying to do, and I agree with Councillor Dyer. It is difficult. We don't have parish councils, we don't have town councils in Lincoln, and I believe in Boston as well. I believe they're the 2 districts that don't have parish councils. So we've got to do things for ourselves, and you know, highways have been a great help to us in my patch, and I would suggest you try and look through the various organisations that will give grants to local communities rather than council money. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Strangle. Just as a point of information, Boston do have a Boston Town Area Committee, which is made up of the town members on the borough, and they've got their own separate budget. They precept separately, as a parish council would, just for, you can do that if you wanted to. Yeah, thank you. Just for a bit of information there. Councillor Mark Whittington.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just want to sort of feedback in my patch, which is 4 villages in the Vale of Belvoir and then a large part of Grantham. In the 4 villages, obviously, they have parish councils. And of course, in Grantham, the Earlsfield Estate being part of Grantham, obviously there's no town council at the moment in Grantham. The experience of the parish councils, one of the parish councils, Sedgebrook, had considerable problems with speeding through the village and purchased some equipment. The parish council actually paid for it. And they actually initially sort of went out and they varied the days when they went out, so people going through never quite knew when they were going to be there. And feeding back, they did say just the effect of motorists going through that village, seeing people in high-vis vests with a piece of kit in their hand, that they didn't know that they were volunteers. They could have been the police, could have been the road safety partnership. They didn't know, but it just seemed to be that effect of seeing somebody in a high-vis vest pointing something at you slows a lot of drivers down. And they spoke with the neighbouring village of Allington, and they borrowed the equipment because quite potentially it's a case of Sedgebrook bought the kit, but actually they've been willing to share it and give it out to other villages. So maybe it's not like be a case of potentially every parish council having a piece of kit, because 3 or 4 neighbouring parishes may be able, because we'll be out there every day, to share the equipment. And it has actually had a really marked effect on speeding. Driving here today, I came through the Great Unnaby village, and the speed awareness people were out there. It's in Alexander Bourne's seat, and it does, you know, you see people there in high-vis vests, and actually people do slow down. I mean, the guy in front of me saw it, brake lights came on, so they do work. I think we really do need to sort of encourage this and to encourage community groups to become involved in this sort of stuff. It's a real shame that sort of certain parts of Lincolnshire don't have town councils, because this is really something that town councils in areas where there aren't parish councils could really take forward. I'm really pleased that there are Have I turned the I'm pleased there are plans going on at the moment to put a town council into Grantham, because I think this is one of the issues that a town council can look at and become involved in. So I really do think this is partly down to the local community to give them a sense of ownership as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Have we got anyone else indicated to speak? No, we haven't. Right. We'll move to the vote unless Councillor Mrs. Overton.
Thank you. I did reserve my right to speak. I wanted to thank everybody for their contributions. I thought that was a really helpful debate, and it demonstrates just how much we as local councillors are listening and thinking about the well-being of our communities. So thank you. Just picking up a few issues, I'm really pleased to hear that we do have some 20-mile-an-hour zones well in place and working well. And it would be good if, with strong local community support, as was mentioned, I think is really important, and that we could have more in, not everywhere, just in the right places where they're clearly needed. I think also the other point to support is the issue about it being part of a package of measures. You know, as was said, it's no good putting it in a 60-mile zone, suddenly going to 20. It's clearly right to have it as part of a package of measures, and I think that's critical to the success, and also to make enforcement easier, because I do see this as a significant challenge, and I think it will depend a lot on how local people are able to support the road safety in those areas as part of a package of measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Overton. I'm going to move to the vote now. I think the amended motion is the substantive motion to all intents and purposes now, because it's been accepted by the movers of the original motion. So we're just voting on the one, and that is as indicated on the screens. So would all those in favour please indicate? Clearly carried. I think that's unanimous. Have we got anybody against? No, or any abstentions? No, that indeed was unanimous. Thank you for that. I now declare the meeting closed. Thanks everyone for your attendance and forbearance and working the way through the meeting. Thank you. You just